Well, it is a pleasure for me to be here. I enjoyed learning poetry. I've never written one, so you know, the only way I can get them is to memorize them and then tell them. So I can guarantee that I probably have more fun in telling them than what you're going to have in listening. But anyway, it's still a lot of fun, and we're glad you're here, even though it's darn cold. One of the best salesmen that Canada ever had was an old boy by the name of Robert Service. You know, he didn't intend on being a salesman. In fact, he got up to the North Country after the gold rush was all over. But as we all know, for poets, the story is the big thing. The realism don't really mean very much to him. He was looking at the story, and so are the stories accurate? Probably not. But it's his stories, and so that's what you got to look at them. It's a long time ago type of story. In their words, and so anyway, the thing is, just have fun. The proceeds derived from the sale of these recitals will go to projects deemed most necessary by the Rotary Club. For more information on this project, contact your local Rotary Club or go to our website, www.dcrotary.ca.
Okay, Robert Service, shooting at Dan McGrew. A bunch of the boys was a-whooping her up down at the old Malemute Saloon. The kid that looks after the music box was playing a jag time tune. Back in the bar in a solo game sat dangerous Dan McGrew, and watching his luck was the light of love, a lady who was known as Lou. When out of the night, which was 50 below, and into the din and the glare, there stumbles this old miner, fresh from the creeks, dog dirty, yes, but loaded for bear. He looked like its man with his foot in the grave, scarcely the strength of a louse. Yet he tilted a poke of gold off the bar and he called for drinks. Drinks for the whole house. Well, there's men that somehow just grip your eyes and hold them hard like a spell. And such was he. It seemed to me like a man who'd lived in hell, with a face most hair and the dreary stare of a dog whose day was done. As he watered the grain stuff in his glass, the drops fell in one by one. Then I got to figuring who he was. And I was wondering what he'd do. And I turned my head, and there watching him was that lady who was known as Lou. Well, his eyes went rubbering around the room. He seemed in a kind of a daze, until at last the old piano fell in the way of his wandering gaze. The jag-time kid was having a drink. There was no one else on the stool. So the stranger stumbled across the floor, and he flopped down there just like a fool. But in a buckskin shirt that was just glazed with dirt, he sat, and I saw him sway. But he clutched the keys in his talon hands. My good God, but that man could play. Have you ever been out in the great alone when the moon was awful clear, and the icy mountains hemmed you in with a silence that you most could hear? And only the howl of a timber wolf. You camped there in the cold, a half-dead thing in a stark, dead world, clean mad for that muck called gold, while high overhead, green, yellow, red, the northern lights swept in bars. Then you've a hunch of what the music meant. Hunger. Night and the stars. Hunger, not of the belly kind that's banished with bacon and beans, no, but the gnawing hunger of lonely men for a home, and all that it means. A home far from the cares that are, of four walls and a roof above, but oh so crammed full of cozy joy and then crowned with a woman's love. A woman dearer than all the world, and true, as heaven is true. My God, how ghastly she looks through her rouge, that lady is known as Lou. And on a sudden, music changed. It grew so soft you scarce could hear, and it seemed your life it had been looted clean of all that it once held dear. That someone had stolen the woman you loved. Her love was a devil's lie. That your guts were gone, and the best for you was to crawl away and die. It was the crowning cry of a heart's despair, and it thrilled you through and through. Well, I guess I'll make her spread my hair, says old dangerous Dan McGrew. Well, the music almost died away. Then a burst of the pent-up flood, and it seemed to say, repay, repay, and my eyes were filled with blood. The thought went back to an ancient wrong. It stung like a frozen lash. The urge awoke to kill. Yes, to kill. Then the music stopped with a crash. The stranger turned. In his eyes they burned in a most peculiar way. Now, boys, says he, now none of you knows me, and none of you cares a damn. I want to state, my words are straight, and I'll bet you my poke that they're true. One of you is a hound of hell, and that one is Dan McGrew. Well, I licked my head when the first shots rang out. Two guns blazed away in the dark. A woman screamed. When the lights went up, two men lay stiff and stark. Pitched on his head and pumped right full of lead was Dangerous Dan McGrew, while the man from the creeks lay clutched to the breast of that lady who was known as Lou. Now these are just the simple facts of the case, and I guess I ought to know. Now some say the stranger was crazed with hooch, and I'll sure not deny that that was so. Now I'm not so wise like those lawyer guys, but strictly between this group, the lady that kissed him and then pinched his spoke was that lady who was known as Lou.
Oh, dear little cabin, I've loved you so long, and now I must bid you goodbye. I've filled you with laughter. I've filled you with song. Why, sometimes I've even wished I could cry. Your walls, they have witnessed a weariful fight, and rung to a one Waterloo. But oh, in my triumph, I am dreary tonight. So goodbye, little cabin, to you. Your roof is bewhiskered. Your floor is aslant. Your walls seem to sag and swing. Now it sounds like I'm trying just to find your faults, but I can't. You poor, tired, heartbroken old thing. Why, I've seen when you were the best friend that I had. You're light like a gem on the snow. You are, yes, you're almost a part of me. Gee, but I'm sad. I hate little cabin to go. But beneath your crack window, red raspberries climb. A hornet's nest hangs from a beam. Your rafters are riddled with adage and rhyme, but dimmed by tobacco and dreams. Every dog has his day, and don't worry, just work. These mottos reproachfully shine. Old calendars dangle. Oh, what memories lurk about you, dear cabin of mine. But I hear the world call and the clang of the fight. I hear the chorus cry of my kind. Yet well do I know as I quit you tonight, it's youth I'll be leaving behind. And oft will I think of you, empty, black, moose antlers nailed over your doors. Oh, if I would perish, my ghost would come back to dwell in you, cabin, once more. How cold, still, and lonely. How dreary you seem. Just one last wishful look, and I'll go. Oh, will you remember the lad in his dream, the lad that you comforted so? The shadows are falling. It's drawing tonight. The evening star needles the sky. Hold on. Something's wetting and screwed up my sight. God bless you, old cabin. Goodbye. This is the song of the parson's son as he squats in his shack alone. It was one of those cold, weird nights when the northern lights shoot up from the frozen zone. Outside it was 60 below, and crouched in the snow, and the hungry huskies moaned. I'm one of the Arctic Brotherhood. I'm an old-time pioneer. I came in with the very first. Oh, God, oh, I've cursed this Yukon, but I'm still here. I've sweated a thirst in its summer heat. I've frozen and I've starved in its cold. I have followed my dreams by at least 1,000 streams. I have toiled and I have boiled for gold. Look at my eyes. I've been snowblind twice. Look where my foot's half gone. And that gruesome scar in my left cheek, that's where the frost fiend bit to the bone. You see, each one is a brand of this devil's land where I played and I lost the game. A broken wreck with a craze for hooch, and never a cent to my name. But this mining is only a gamble. Its worst is just as good as its best. I came in with a bunch that could have gone out right on top like the rest, like old George Carmack, Ledoux, MacDonald. Oh, God, but it's hell to think of the thousands and thousands I squandered on cards and women and drink. Well, in the early days, we were just a few. Oh, we hunted and fished around. But we never dreamt by our lonely campfire of all the wealth that lay under the ground. We had traded in skins and whiskey. I often slept under the shade of that big old lone birch tree on Bonanza, you know, where the first big find was made. We were just like a great big family. Everybody had a squaw. But we lived such a wild, free, fearless life because we were beyond the pale of the law. Till sudden, there came a whisper, gold. And it maddened us every man. But you see, I was in on Bonanza long before the gold rush began. Oh, those Dawson days. And the sin and the blaze. The town was all open wide. Why, if God made me in his likeness, then he must have left the devil inside. But then we were all mad, both the good and the bad, and as for the women, well, no spot on the map in so short a space has hustled more souls to hell. Money was just like dirt there, easy to get, but easier to spend. But I was all caked in on this one dance hall jade, and she shook me in the end, and it put me queer. And for nearly a year, I never drew a sober breath, till I found myself in a bug house ward with a claim staked out on death. Well, 20 years in the Yukon, struggling along its creeks, roaming its giant valleys, scaling its godlike peaks, bathed in its fiery sunsets, fighting its fiendish cold. 20 years in the Yukon. 20 years! And now I'm old. Old and weak. But there's still a bit of hooch in the bottle still. I go hitch up the dogs tomorrow. I'll mush on down the trail and see Bill. Oh, it's so long dark, and I'm so lonesome. I think I'll just lie down on the bed. Tomorrow I'll go. Yeah, tomorrow. Well, tonight I'll just gonna play on the bed. Come, Kit, your pony is saddled. I'm waiting, dear, in the court. Kit, you devil, I'll kill you if you dance with that flossy sport. How much is I'll go to the pound, Bill? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. This was the song of the parson's son. As he lay in his bunk alone, ere the fire went out, and the cold crept in, his blue lips ceased to moan. Those hunger-maddened malamutes came in and ripped him flesh from bone. I tried to refine that neighbor of mine. Honest to God, I did. I grieved for his fate. And early and late, I looked after him just like a kid. I gave him excuse. I bore his abuse in every way that I could. I tried to prevail. I even camped on his trail. I plotted and I planned for his good. By day, by night, whenever in man's sight, I tried to gather him into the fold. With precept, prayer, hope, despair, with hunger, hardship, and cold. I followed him into the Gehennas of sin. I even sat where the sirens sit. In the shade of the pole, for the good of his soul, I strove with the powers of the pit. Well, I shadowed him down to that scrupulous town. I even drug him in dissolute brawls. But I killed the galoot when he started to shoot electricity into my walls. God knows what I did. You should try to be rid of one who would save you from shame. God knows what I bore the night that he swore and bade me make tracks from his claim. I had only time to tell of the horrors of hell. And suddenly his eyes went like coals. Oh, stuff it, says he. Don't persecute me with your cant and your saving of souls. Well, I'll swear that I was as mild as I would be with a child. But he called me the son of a slut. And he grabbed up his gun, and with a leap and a run, he threatened my face with its butt. Oh, what could I do? Well, I'll leave that up to you. But with curses, he harries me forth. Then he was alone, and I was alone. And over us menaced the north. Our cabins were near. I could see, I could hear, and between us there rippled this creek. And all summer through, with a rancor that grew, he would pass me, but never would speak. Then a shuddery breath, just like the coming of death, crept down from those peaks far away. The water was still. The evenings were chill, and the sky was a tatter of gray. Then swift came the big cold, and like opal and gold, the lights of the witches arose. The frost tyrant clinched, and the valleys were all cinched in those stark and cadaverous snows. Well, the trees were like lace, and where starbeams raced, each leaf was like a jewel gleam, and a strong white hush lapped the northland, and wrapped us all round in a crystalline dream. So still I could hear, quite loud in my ear, the swish of the pinions of time. So bright I could see, just as plain as could be, the wings of God's angels of shine. Well, as I read in the book, I would oftentimes look to that cabin just over the creek. Ah, me, but it was sad, and evil, and bad. Two neighbors who never would speak. But I knew that full well, just like a devil in hell, he was hatching out, early and late, a system to bear through that frost-spangled air, the warm crimson waves of his hate. And I knew that he nursed with a malice accursed, just like a blast from a winnowing flame. And I pleaded aloud for his shield, for his shroud. Oh God, then calamity came. What? Me mad? Well, if I'm mad, then you too are mad. That's all the point of view. If you'd seen them things gallivanting on wings, all purple and green and blue, if you'd seen them twist as they mounted and hissed like scorpions dim in the dark, if you'd seen them rebound to that horrible sound while spitefully spitting a spark, if you'd seen them with dread as they hissed by your bed, in them things with the feelers that crawls, you'd have killed the brute that attempted to shoot electricity into your walls. Some they were blue. They slithered right on through. They were silent, squashy and round. And some they were green. They're wriggly and lean, and they writhed with so horrid a sound. Well, my blood seemed to freeze. I fell on my knees. My face was like a white splash of dread. Oh, the green and the blue, they were gruesome to view. But the worst of them all was the red. They came to the floor, they came to the door, they came to those moss-covered logs. They were savage and dire, bewhiskered with fire, and they bickered like malamute dogs. They ravaged in rings just like iniquitous things. They gobbled up the green and the blue. Well, I just cringed in fear whenever they grew near, and nearer they grew. Then came the crown of horror's grim crown, that monster so loathsomely red. Each eye was a pin that moved out and in, as squid-like it oozed to my bed. So softly it crept, with feelers that swept and quivered like fine copper wire. Its belly was white with a sulphurous light, and its jaws were a-drooling with fire. It came and it came, I could smell of its flame, yet never a wink did I look. And I stuck in its maw the fount of the law, and I shielded it off with the book. I was weak, oh so weak, yet I thrilled at its shriek as it wildly fled in the night. Then deathlike I lay till the dawn of the day. Whew, 'twas ever so welcome, the light. Well, I loaded my gun at the rise of the sun, and to his cabin so softly I slunk. My neighbor was there in the frost-braided air. 'Course he's all wrapped in a robe on his bunk. It muffled his moans, it outlined his bones, as feebly he twisted about. His lips were all cracked, gums were all black, and his teeth were loosening out. It was a death's face that appeared through a tangle of beard. It was a face I will never forget. Sunk eyes full of woe, they troubled me so with their pleading, their anguish. And yet, as I rested my gaze with misty amaze on that scurvy, degenerate wreck, my thoughts went back to those things with those dragonfly wings, and I laid my gun on his neck. Well, he let out a cry that was soft as a sigh. It was just like a perishing malamute. And he says unto me, "I'm converted," says he, "for Christ's sake, Peter, don't shoot!" Pew! Well, they're taking me out with an escort about. As you can see, I am under a sergeant's care. And I am humbled indeed, for I am cuffed to an old Swede that thinks he's a millionaire. Yes, it's all gospel true what I'm telling to you, out there where the shadows fall. Yes, I settled Sam Newt when he started to shoot electricity into my walls. Sam McGee was from Tennessee, way down south where the cotton blooms and blows. Now why he left his home in the south to roam around the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but the land of gold just seemed to hold him just like a spell. Though he'd often say in his homely way that he'd far sooner live in hell. Well, on a Christmas day, we were mushing our way over the Dawson Trail. Now you talk of the cold, through the parka's fold it stabbed just like a driven nail. If our eyes would close, our lashes froze. Sometimes we couldn't even see. No, it sure weren't much fun. But the only one to whimper was Sam McGee. And that very night, as we laid packed tight in our robes beneath the snow, the dogs had been fed and the stars overhead were just a dancing, heel and toe, and he turns to me and, "Captain," says he, "I'm going to cash in this trip, I guess. And if and I do, I'm asking you that you won't refuse my last request." Well, he looked so cold that I couldn't say no. And he said with a sort of a moan, "You know, it's a cursed cold, and it has got right hold of me till I'm chilled right through to the bone. It tain't being dead. It's the awful dread of the icy grave that pains. And I'm asking you that foul or fair, that you'll cremate my last remains." Well, a pal's last need is a thing you better heed. So I swore I would not fail. And off we went at the streak of dawn. My God, he looked ghastly pale. And he sat in the sleigh and he raved all day about his home down in Tennessee. By nightfall, a corpse was all that was left of Sam McGee. Well, there wasn't a breath in that land of death, and I hurried horror-driven with a half-hid corpse that I couldn't get rid because of that promise given. It was lashed to the sleigh, and it seemed to say, "You may tax your brawn and brain, but you promised true, and now it's up to you to cremate those last remains." Well, a promise made is a debt unpaid, and the trail has got its own stern code. In the days to come, though my lips were dumb, in my heart how I cursed that load. And in a long, long night by the lone firelight, and the huskies round in a ring howled out their woes to the homeless snows. Oh God, how I loathed that thing. And every day, that quiet clay seemed to heavy and heavier grow. But on we went, though the dogs were spitting, the grub was a-running low, and the trails were bad, and I felt half mad, but I swore I would not give in. And I'd often sing to that hateful thing. It seemed to hearken with a grin. Till we came to the marge of Lake LaBarge, and there a derelict lay. Though it was stuck in the ice, I saw in a trice it was called Alice May. Then I looked at it, and I thought a bit, and I looked at my frozen chum. "Here," said I with a sudden cry, "here is my crematorium." Well, some planks I ripped from the cabin floor, and I lit the boiler fire. Some coal I found lie around, and I heaped the fuel higher. Well, the flames just soared. The furnace roared. Such a blaze you very seldom see. Then I burrowed a hole in the glowing coals, and I shoved in old Sam McGee. And then I made a hike, because I surely didn't like to hear him sizzling so. And the heavens scowled, the huskies howled, and the winds they began to blow. It was icy cold. But the hot sweat just rolled down my cheek, and I don't know why. But the greasy smoke in an inky cloak went streaking on down the sky. Well, I do not know how long it was in that grisly snow that I wrestled with that grisly fear. But the stars came out and danced overhead. Ere again I ventured near. I was sick with dread, but I bravely said, "I'd just better take a look inside. I'm guessing he's cooked, but it's time I looked." And so the door I opened wide. And there sat Sam. He's looking calm and cool in the heart of the furnace roar. He wore a smile you could have seen for a mile. He said, "Would you please close the door? It's fine in here, but I greatly fear that you're going to let in the cold and the storm. Since I left Plumtree down in Tennessee, this is the first time I've been warm. Yes, folks, there are some strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails, their secret tales that'll make your blood run cold. Now, the Northern Lights have seen some pretty queer sights, but the queerest that they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake LaBarge that I cremated old Sammy McGee. I wanted the gold, and I sought it. I scrabbled and I mucked just like a slave. Was it famine? Scurvy? I fought it. I just hurled my youth into the grave. You see, I wanted the gold, and I finally got it. I came out with a fortune last fall. Yet somehow, life ain't what I thought it. No, somehow the gold isn't all. You see, there's that land. Have you seen it?
blessedest land that I know. From the big dizzy mountains that screen it to the deep death-like valleys below. Now some say God must have been tired when he made it. Others say it's a fine land to shun. That may be, but there's also some that would trade for no land on earth. And I'm one. You come to get rich? That's a damn good reason. It seems you're in exile at first. And you hate it like hell, but that's only for a season. Then you are worse than the very worst. You see, it grips you like some kinds of sinning. It'll twist you from a foe to a friend. It seems it's been since the very beginning. It seems it will be to the very end. Now I have stood in some mighty mouthed hollows that have been plumb full of hush, right to the brim. I've watched that big dizzy sun wallow in crimson and gold and then grow dim, till the moon set those pearly peaks just a-gleamin'. And the stars all tumbled out neck and crop, and I thought, well, surely, I must be dreaming, with the peace of the world piled up on the top. The summer, no sweeter was ever. The sunshiny woods, all a-thrill, with the grayling leaping in the river, the bighorn sheep sleeping up on the hill. It's a strong land, it'll never know harness. The wilds, where the caribou call. Oh, the freshness, the farness, the freedom. Oh, God, how I'm stuck on it all. But the winter, it's the brightness that blinds you. That white land locked up just tight as a drum. You see, it's cold fear that follows and finds you. Yes, but it's the silence that bludgeons you dumb. Snows that are older than history. Woods where those weird shadows slant. Oh, the stillness, the moonlight, the mystery. I bade them all goodbye, but I can't. There's a land where the mountains are nameless. Rivers all run, God knows where. There are lives that are erring and aimless, and deaths that just hang by a hair. There are hardships that nobody has reckoned. There are valleys, unpeopled, but still there's that land. Oh, it beckons and beckons. And I want to go back. And I will. They're making my money diminish. I'm absolutely sick of the taste of champagne. Thank God when I'm skinned to a finish, I'll fight to the Yukon again, and I'll fight. It'll be no sham fight. It's hell, yes, but I've been there before. And it's better than this by a damn sight. So it's me for the Yukon once more. Yes, there's gold. And it's haunting and haunting. It's trying to lure me as of old. It isn't the gold that I'm after. So much as just finding the gold. It's that great big broad land way up yonder. It's the forests where silence has lease. See, it's the beauty that fills me with, but it's the stillness that fills me with peace.
Talking about Blasphemous Bill McKay. I took a contract to bury the body of Blasphemous Bill McKay, irregardless of wherever, whenever, or whatsoever manner of death that he should die. Whether he would die in the light of day, or under peak-face moon, in a cabin or a dance hall, camp or dive, with mucklucks, patent shoes, velvet tundra, virgin peak, glacier, drift or draw, in a muskeg hollow, canyon gloom, avalanche, fang or claw, battle, murder, sudden wealth, pestilence, hooch, or lead. And I was to swear in the book that I would continue to look until I found my doomless dead. For Bill was a dainty kind of a cuss, but his mind was sure mighty set on having this frilly little grave with flowers and grass set on a civilized backbone lot. Now how he died or where he died, that just didn't seem to matter a damn. He just wanted this frilly little grave with a tombstone epigram. Anyhow, I made the promise, and he paid the price in good Chichapo coin, which I then took and blew that very night down at the old Tenderloin. Then I built me a sign from a 3-foot slab. Here lies poor Bill McKay, Then I hung it on my cabin wall, and I waited for old Bill to die. Well, years came and went. Then one day came a squaw with a story mighty strange of a long deserted line of traps away back of the Bighorn Range, of a little cabin by a great divide, and a white man, stiff and still. He's lying there all by his lonesome self. And I got to thinking, I wonder if that's Bill. And I thought of the contract I'd made with him. So I took down from the shelf that shiny black box that he'd picked with the silver plate that he'd picked out for himself. And I filled it up full of grub and hooch, and I slung it on my sleigh. Then I harnessed up my team of dogs, and I was off at the dawn of day. Well, do you know what it's like in the Yukon Wild when it's 69 below? Well, the iceworms wriggle their purple heads up to a little crust of the pale blue snow. The little pines break off like guns in the silence of the woods, and icicles hang down like little tusks from under the parka hood. While the campfire smoke breaks sudden off, and the sky is weirdly lit, and a careless touch on a bit of steel burns like a red-hot spit. Well, the mercury stays in a frozen ball. The frost fiend stalks to kill. Well, it was just like that day I started out to look for old Bill. Oh, the awful hush that seemed to crush me down on every hand as we stumbled blind to the trail to find through that blank and bitter land, half dazed, half crazed through the winter wild with its own heart-breaking woes. Row the ruthless strife for a grip on life that only the sourdough knows. North by the river, north I pressed, river, peak, plain. If I paused to dream, I stood to lose, so I waked to dream again. Oh, river, plain, mighty peak, you tell me who could stand unawed as her summits blazed while you'd stand undazed. It was just like being at the foot of the throne of God. North, north, through a land accursed, shunned by even its scouring brutes. But all I could hear was my own harsh voice, that and the whine of the malamutes. Till at last I came to this cabin squat. It was built in the side of a hill. As I burst in the door, why, there on the floor, frozen to death, lay old Bill. Ice, white ice, ice like a winding sheet, sheeting each smoke-grimed wall. Ice on the stovepipe, ice on the bed, ice lying over all. Sparkling ice on the dead man's chest, glittering ice in his hair, ice on his fingers, ice in his heart, ice in his glassy stare. Hard as a log, yet trussed like a frog, with his arms and his legs outspread. Then I looked at this little coffin I'd brought for him, and I looked back at my gruesome dead. Well, have you ever been in an Arctic hut in the shadow of the pole, with a little coffin, 6 by 2, with a grief that you can't control? Tell me, have you ever sat by a frozen corpse, looks at you with a grin, and seems to say, go ahead, you can try all day, you ain't never gonna jam me in? Well, I'm not a man of the quitting kind, but I have never felt so blue as I sat there looking at that stiff. I didn't know what I was gonna do. Well, at last I got up and I kicked off the husky dogs that had been nosing round about, and I lit a roaring fire in the stove. Then I started to thaw old Bill out. Well, I thawed, and I thawed for 13 days, but it just didn't seem no good. His arms and his legs, they still just stood out like pegs. It was almost as if they was made of wood. Well, at last I says, well, this sure ain't much use. No, he's just froze too hard to thaw. He's obstinate, and he just ain't gonna fit in. So I guess I have to saw. Well, folks, I did. I sawed off poor old Bill's arms and his legs, and I laid them all snug and straight in that shiny black box that he'd picked out for himself, you know, the one with the dinky little silver plate. And I came nigh near to shedding a tear as I nailed him safely down. Then I loaded him up on my Yukon sleigh and I started heading back for town. Well, I did. I buried him just as the contract was, in a narrow grave and deep. And there he awaits the great cleanup, you know, when those judgment sluice heads are going to sweep. And I sit in my pipe and meditate in the land of the midnight sun, thinking back of some of the things that was, of a few of the terrible things that I have done. And as I sit, the parson talks. Of course, now he's expounding on the law. But my mind goes back to poor old Bill, and of just how hard he was to saw.
this poem is written by a Dr. George Street, a past president of the Calgary Centennial Rotary Club. They asked him why would he want to be a Rotarian, and this is what he wrote, and I got a copy of it. Why bother to be a Rotarian? Of what advantage is it in life? Well, for me, the answer goes way back in time, back when most of the world was in strife. Back to the days when a madman named Hitler, his Nazis, so vicious and so bold, had spread horror all across Europe, far worse than that grim plague of old. His panzers rolled over the countries, his Luftwaffe battered the isle, his U-boats sank the Allied ships, all opponents he swore he'd defile. Then those that had been raised to nourish on freedom rose up to meet the new problem at hand, and thousands of young Canadians bore arms and left our land. Soon, the glory of war turned to horror as into the combat they tore, to the brink of hell, yes, and past that. Why, their heroics are a part of our lore. Their planes were oft shot from beneath them as they raced across the sky, and on the ground their buddies beside them were oft hit, and they had to watch them die. And many a warship was torpedoed as a convoy had fought to defend. Yes, the killing and the maiming went on for so long, my God, was it ever to end? Well, as the numbers of wounded kept mounting, the medical corps stood tall as they gathered their hurt toward safety and away from the battlefield's pall, nursed back to health by the sisters. When well, they just went back to war. But for the more severely injured, a train ride to a friendly shore, where the Canadian hospital ship waited, Letitia was its name, and to gather its precious cargo and to take them back home again. While the medics tenderly admitted their patients, 750 each trip, to give medical care during their crossing in that hospital that was a ship. Now, although the passage of time tends to dim one's memory, and already over half a century has passed, but some sights sear so deep in the lobes of your brain that forever their visions will last. Faces distorted by hideous burns, eyes that can no longer see, a jacket sleeve dangling empty where once a strong arm used to be, or a young man's weight being borne on 2 crutches because his 2 good legs had been blasted to 1. Worse, a man in a wheelchair with 2 stumps caused by the wrath of a gun. But finally, the grim carnage was over. Peace, yes, peace had put an end to the strife, and millions of people all over the world, and they all prayed for a much better life. And in war, is there ever really a winner when the final accounting is gone? When you finally tally up the costs that have been borne, paid by each mother, father, daughter, or son? But for thousands of we Rotarians, there is a better way, we know. Peace and world understanding. That's the good seeds that Rotarians sow. And so our exchange students gather in some faraway distant land. From all over the globe you can see them as they all meet, talk, walk hand in hand. Now down that golden pathway, paved with respect, understanding, and love, the praying hawk stands flightless, for this is the realm of the dove. And our fine ambassadorial scholars are really knocking down the barriers of race as they gather alongside the foreigners, and we all meet face to face. And our many projects of goodwill cover a very broad range: health, hunger, humanity, a group study exchange. And yet every year, as we meet at an international convention, the message of the fostering of goodwill from all over the globe is really too numerous to even mention. And yet every year as we meet and we mingle with the others, it soon becomes very apparent that all mankind really are just brothers. So why belong to Rotary? It's a question I've asked myself, and the demands it places on my time and money leave other things back on the shelf. But for me, the answer becomes obvious. We must never give up the fight to foster the ideals of Rotary, to leave the world an everlasting light. Okay, if you can't be a pine on the top of a hill, be a scrub in the valley. But be the best little scrub by the side of the rill. Be a bush if you can't be a tree. If you can't be a bush, then be a blade of grass and some highway happier make. If you can't be a pickerel, then just be a perch, but be the liveliest perch in the lake. You see, we can't all be captains. There has got to be crew. There's something for all of us here. There's big jobs to do, small jobs to do, but the thing we must do is the near. If you can't be a highway, then just be a trail. If you can't be the sun, be a star. It really doesn't matter whether you're big or you're small, just be the best of whatever you are. This This is a story that Jimmy Dean made popular years ago. You'll probably remember it. Every morning at the mine you could see him arrive. He stood 6'6", weighed 245. He was broad at the shoulder, narrow at the hip. How everybody knew you didn't give no lip to Big John. Nobody really knew where John called home. He just kind of drifted into town and he stayed all alone. Didn't say very much. In fact, he was kind of quiet and shy. And if you spoke at all, you just said hi to Big John. Somebody said he'd come from New Orleans, where he'd gotten into a fight over the Cajun Queen, and a crashing blow from a huge right hand that sent Louisiana feller to the promised land, Big John. But then came that day at the bottom of the mine. Timbers were cracking. Grown men started crying. Miners got to praying. Hearts were beating fast. Everybody figured they'd breathe their last. That is, except John. Well, through the smoke and the dust of that man-made hell walked a giant of a man that all the miners knew well. He grabbed the sagging timber and let out with a groan. And like a giant old oak tree, he just stood there alone. Then, with all of his strength, he gave another mighty shove. And a miner yelled, "Hey, look, there's a light up above, and 20 men scrambled from that would-be grave. Now there's only one left down there to save, and that's old John." Well, they all grabbed jacks and timbers, and they started back down, and whoo! There, all this smoke came rumbling up out of the ground. Smoke and gas belched out of that mine. Everybody knew that was the end of the line for Big John. Now they never did reopen that worthless pit. Just placed a marble stand in front of it. These few words are written on that stand. At the bottom of this mine lies one huge man, Big John.
If you think you're beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you like to win but think you can't, it's almost certain you won't. If you think you'll lose, you've lost. For out in the world we find that success begins with a person's will. You see, it's all in your state of mind. If you think you are outclassed, you are. You have got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself before you can ever win a prize. See, life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man. Sooner or later, the person who wins is the person who thinks that they can. It was suggested to me, or given to me, by a young girl at a ripening camp a few years ago, who was reading about the tough times they had back in the 30s out on the prairies. And she asked if I would read this to the camp. And this was the way the story went. "Mighty cold on the road today," the stranger said as he entered. And he asked for a cup of coffee. But the lady shook her head. He offered all he had, was just a little pencil. But they had this hard, fast rule, cash only. So the stranger turned in his old gray coat and walked out again back into that blizzard, cold and cruel. Well, soon the family went to call the man back, but he was now gone from sight. But the words of that stranger troubled that family all through that cold and bitter winter's night. Well, the papers on the morrow told of a man who had been found dead. He hadn't eaten in many days, was what the coroner's verdict read. Now, no one leaves there empty. Who enters but who cannot pay? For the words of that stranger still ring in that family's ears. Mighty cold on the road today. The second one is called The Dash. Memorial Day was over now. The crowd was gone, and I was alone. And so I began to look at the names and the dates placed there on every headstone. Well, the name said whether it was Mom, or Dad, or sister, or baby son. The dates were all different, but the amounts were the same. There were 2 dates on every one. But it was then that they got to noticing something. It was but a simple line. It was, of course, the dash between the dates. Placed there, it stood for the time. And I got to noticing just how important was that little line. You see, the dates placed there belong to God. But that little line, that's yours and mine. For it's God who gave us this precious life, and it's God who will take it away. But the line between, he gives that to us. We can do with it just whatever we may. Now, we know he's written the first date down of each and every one. And we know whose hands is going to write again. For that last date is definitely going to come. Now, we know he'll write that last date down, and all too soon, for some, we know. But on the dash between our dates, I sure hope he can write. Well done. It's called the Master's Hand, and I heard about it first when old Miller Patterson passed on. It was at his funeral the first time I ever heard this poem. Anyway, it was battered and scarred. The auctioneer thought it was scarcely worth his while to spend much time on the old violin. So he held it up to the bow and said, "Well, what am I bid, good folks? Who wants to start the bidding for me?" It was quiet. Finally, one old boy said, "Well, I'll give you $1." $1. "I'll make it 2. Yep, 3, yep. Going once for 3, going twice for 3, and stop! From the far corners of the room, an old man slowly came forward, and he picked up the bow, a few adjustments made, tightened a few strings, and then he played a melody as pure and sweet as a caroling angel can possibly sing. Well, eventually, the music ceased. Then with a voice that was quiet and low, the auctioneer said, "Now, what am I really bid for this old violin?" And he held it up with the bow. "I'll give you $1,000. I'll make it 2. Yep, now 3. Yep, and now 4. Going once for 3, going twice for 3, and sold." Well, the crowd cheered. But some of them said, "We don't understand. What changed its worth?" Swift came the auctioneer's reply. It was just the touch of the master's hand. You know, there's many a man with his life on a tune. And he's been battered and scarred by sin. And he is auctioned cheap to the thoughtless crowd. A lot like that old violin, a mess of pottage, a glass of wine, a game, and he travels on. He's going once, he's going twice, he's going and he's almost gone, but the master comes. And the foolish crowd will never understand the worth of a soul, the change that's made just by the touch of the master's hand. This is entitled Joys of Giving. Life is not measured by the years that we live, but by the deeds that we do and the joys that we give. And every day as it comes gives a chance for each one to live life to the fullest. We should leave nothing undone. So then really, what does it matter how long that we live, if, as long as we live, we unselfishly give? All right, Casey at the bat. Well, the outlook sure wasn't very brilliant for the Mudville 9 that day. The score stood 4-2, but with 1 inning more to play. But then when Cooney died at first, and Barrows did the same, a sickly silence fell upon the patrons of that game. A straggling few got up to go in deep despair. But the rest clung to that hope eternal that beats within the human breast. They felt that if only Casey could get but one whack at that, why, they'd put up even money now, with Casey at the bat. But Flynn preceded Casey, as did Jimmy Blake. Now the former was a real Lulu, and the latter a piece of cake. And so upon the stricken multitude, grim melancholy sat, though there sure didn't seem like very much chance of Casey getting up to bat. But Flynn let drive a single, to the wonder of them all. And Blake, the much despised, tore the cover off the ball. And when the dust had settled and the crowd could see what had occurred, there was Jimmy safe at second, while Flynn was ahead in third. Well now, from the throats of 5,000, maybe more, there arose a lusty yell. It rattled in the valley, it rattled in the dell, it knocked against the mountains, and it recoiled in the flat for, yes, Casey. Yep, mighty old Casey was advancing to the bat. Well, there was ease in Casey's manner as he stepped into his place. There was pride in Casey's bearing and a smile on Casey's face. And then, acknowledging the cheers, Casey lightly doffed his hat. Not a stranger in the crowd would doubt. Yes, it was Casey at the bat. 10,000 eyes were on him as he rubbed his hands with dirt. 5,000 tongues that applauded as he wiped them on his shirt. And while the writhing pitcher screwed the ball into his hip, defiance gleamed on Casey's face. A snarl curled Casey's lip. And then the leather covered sphere came a-hurtling through the air. But Casey stood a-watching it in a haughty grandeur there. Close by the sturdy batsman, the ball unheeded sped. "Not my style," says Casey. "Steve, right one," the umpire says.
Kill him! Kill him! Kill that umpire! Shouted someone from the stands. And it's likely that they would have killed him had not Casey raised his hand and with a smile of Christian charity, great Casey's visage just shone. He stilled the rising tumult. He bade the game go on. Then he motioned to the pitcher, and one more time a spheroid flew, and Casey again stood and ignored it. The umpire said, "Stee right too." "Fraud! Fraud! Fraud!" cried the maddened thousands, and even the echo answered fraud. With one scornful look for Casey, the audience was awed. Then they saw his face grew stern, cold. They saw his muscles strain. They knew old Casey wouldn't let that ball go by again. Well, the snarl is now gone from Casey's face. His teeth are clenched in hate, and he beats with pure violence his bat upon the plate. And now the pitcher has the ball. And now he lets it go. And now the air is shattered by the force of Casey's blow. Well, folks, somewheres in this favored land, the sun is a-shining bright. A band is playing somewheres, and yes, somewheres hearts are light. Somewhere men are happy. Somewhere children shout. There is no joy in Mudville, you see. Muddy old Casey has just struck out. In the year 2000, I crossed Canada on a bicycle promoting Rotary's Polio Plus program. We bought a book in Swift Current, Swift Current, Saskatchewan, and found a poem that I thought was really, really good. It talks about a train driver, a train engineer, and who drives a high-speed continental passenger train known as the Limited. It is purported to be a true story. Now, I'm not superstitious, or at least I don't call it that. But when someone spins a creepy yarn, I sure don't deny it flat. For a man who has spent his lifetime with a throttle in his hand is just bound to have had a few adventures that he just cannot understand. Yes, I sometimes think that our knowledge here is but a sorry show, that really we're just on the borderland of what there really is to know. Yes, I used to think that a man could know all things that could be known, that there was certainly no reason to acknowledge any power above our own, that irregardless of how strange the circumstance, there always is a cause, and it is in complete obedience to at least some of nature's laws. But I couldn't shake conviction off, no matter how hard I tried, and so I changed my way of thinking after the night that Willie died. You see, Willie was my little son. He was my greatest earthly joy. And Ma and I, we just kind of seemed, dote upon the boy. Why, when I was out on duty, she would hover around the lad and treasure up his sayings and then repeat them to his dad. And every night at lighting time, I knew that without fail, his baby lips were home praying for the man out on the rails. Well, for 5 short years, we knew what a treasure really is. We became very much accustomed to those sweet little ways of his. And then one day, swinging through the gate, I saw with blanching face my wife, just as pale as ashes, a doctor in the place. Well, I tried to go on in steady, but my knees were knocking hard, and the lights just seemed to go out of heaven as I staggered up the yard. Well, the doctor was a friend of mine, who had children of his own, but he did not need to tell me. A blind man would have known. By that labored, quick-caught breathing, the little burning brow, it meant that the visitor was ready and was waiting for him right now. While we all sat beside his bedside in quiet, deep despair, the years just seemed to pour down on top of us as we faced each other there. Well, it was just a little before midnight when a ring came on the bell. It was the call boy. Say, "Excuse me, sir, but I was sent to tell you that the Limited is ready and there's just no one else around. They want to know if you'll come and take her, because if you can't, then she just can't go out." Well, I left the answer to my wife. And she said, well, with lips as white as snow, "Yeah, go ahead. You might just well go ahead and do your duty." So I thought and then said, "Okay, well, I'll go." Well, I told the crew. And my fireman beside me in his rough and ready way said that his heart was feeling things that he just could not say. Well, the night was dark, moonless. The bright stars overhead seemed to be whispering to each other, his little boy is dead. The very locomotive seemed to read my thoughts all right, and the engine just seemed to throb in sympathy as we bulleted on through the night. We'd been running fast and steady. It was a little after 2. Passengers were all sleeping, oh, maybe a few back in the smoke car still swapping stories, when all of a sudden a sight that filled my eyes, that filled my heart with terror and affright. For there, standing right before me, outlined against the halo of the light, stood a little child, outlined against the blackness of the night. No, I could not have been mistaken. I would have known him anywhere. His father's chin and forehead, his mother's eyes and hair. Two little outstretched arms seemed to coax and say, Daddy, come and kiss me, because I have to go far away. Well, I flung the brakes and the throttle, and amid the hissing steam, the vision grew, vanished, as if in a dream. Well, we finally got stopped. My fireman beside me said, your nerves is just going, Jack. Let's just leave the engine here. Come on. Let's take a little walk along the track. The exercise will do you good. So I followed as he led, till we reached this steep gorge that lay about 100 yards ahead. Well, the night winds cooled my temples as we walked the bridge upon, and all of a sudden we both suddenly stopped and gasped. You know, that whole center span of the bridge was gone. Now, you may call that a hallucination. I know some other folks do. But I know the master come and took my boy home at night at exactly 2:30. And I know that the prayers of all those passengers was just been offered up in vain, because had my son's spirit, dressed in his baby clothes, not stood before my train, yes, I know I cried in my window seat, was probably otherwise ill-behaved. But I know that the timing of my son's death meant that all those other lives were saved. I was usually in trouble and never got bored the days I was driving my Model T Ford. It was simple to operate, easy to fix if you knew how it worked, and a couple of tricks. It had brakes, reverse, a low and high gear. You had to push hard on your foot, that was clear. The steering wheel, placed on my T for the Model A version, was larger, you see. But it was thicker too, with no room for the nut. If there was a problem, well, I didn't know what, but it was keyed so it wouldn't slip anyway, and the steering was easier, and I liked it that way. Well, my friend Johnny and I often worked as a team. When we finished our chores, well, we'd cook up some scheme. Well, we were hauling a barrel of water one day up a pretty steep hill for the tea, I would say. Now, the barrel was topless, so Johnny was riding in back to prevent that old barrel from sliding. The steep part was rocky, the going was rough, but we're under control, so it wasn't too tough. I push hard on the pedal to keep her in gear, and the brace I pull up on the wheel as I steer. Well, the steering wheel came off and hit me smack dab in the nose, but that smacking was only the start of my woes. Well, now I had to grab something to keep pushing down. I can't stop on the slope, though I feel like a clown. So one hand on the throttle, one holding on, can't wipe my face, my dignity's gone. With all the blood and the tears, I can't see, I can't steer, I can't stop on the slope, oh, my plight is severe. And now poor Johnny in back as we lurch up the hill is still holding the barrel so that it wouldn't spill. Well, after lurching and jerking our way to the top where the brakes finally held, we came to a stop. We were under control and were glad we had fought her, but now we had to go back down the hill for more water. Thank you, Lord, for all the years of health and happiness. I don't know why it is that my life you chose to bless. I know your 10 Commandments. Well, no, I don't live them to the letter. I know I'm sure far from perfect, Lord. I should be a whole bunch better. Thank you, Lord, for letting me live in the shadows of these mountains tall. For 2 eyes twice meet see your pretty colors in the fall. For the Chinook winds that blow in here and whip the winter snow. For letting me ride in those high up places where only eagles normally go. Thank you, Lord, for the food I eat, for the water when I'm dry, for giving me freedom so I might spread my wings and fly. I've had my ups and downs, yes, I've suffered several broken bones, but I know they were only there to remind me that immortality is yours alone. Thank you, Lord, for all my friends, for the good horses that I've owned. When I think of all those many wayward nights when you saw me safely home, for the rains that you send and the sunshine to bring all those pretty flowers, the new grass in the spring. Thank you, Lord, for 3 fine kids, my life of over 60 years. When I think of all those miles and miles and miles of happiness and just a few short yards of tears. Yes, I don't know what it is and why it is that my life you chose to preserve. But I want to thank you, Lord, for giving us so much more than what we probably really deserve.
Susie Lee done fall in love. She planned to marry Joe. In fact, she felt so good about it, she told her pappy so. Well, pappy says, you cannot marry Joe, my child. You'll have to find another. Now, I just assume your ma don't know, but you see, Joe is your half-brother. Huh. Anyway, Susie put aside her Joe. Then she met and planned to marry Will. But when she told her pappy, he said, oh, there's trouble still. You cannot marry Will, my child. But please, now, please, don't tell your mother. But you see, Will and Joe and several more I know is your half-brother. But Mama knew. And she said, child, you just do what makes you happy. Marry Will or marry Joe. You see, the fact is, you ain't no kin to pappy.
Now, Jed had lost his hearing. And now he'd also lost his cow. And he'd hunted hill and hollow, but he lost her trail somehow. So Jed went to the preacher to recruit some help from church. The preacher said, yeah, he'd call for Ben to help him with the search. So Sunday from the pulpit came the call for volunteers. Jed told him that his cow was black, with white around both ears. Said you'd be able to spot her real easy on account that both of her horns turned up. She'd answer if she heard her name, called Old Buttercup. So Jed described her horns to tail. The picture left no doubt. And so they organized this big cow hunt to start when church was out. Well, now the preacher had one more concern before his Sunday text, and he checked his church agenda to determine just what was next. He then announced a brand new member. Widow Jones was asked to stand, and the congregation offered Widow Jones a welcome hand. Several stood to testify they'd heard Widow Jones could sing a fine soprano. She even played the bones. Others stood and said that they heard she could even preach. Woohoo! She was full of fire. And so it was with welcome arms that they welcomed Widow Jones into the choir. Well, now Jed, he thought that they were still talking about his cow. And he just remembered some things that he had forgotten up until now, and so he stood. Well, of course, everybody held their breath. Now, Lulu Hawkins claims that what happened next was worse than death. Well, Jed said, no, she sure ain't much for pretty. And she ain't never going to make no record book. Why, with bony hips and big fat lips, and she's older than she looks. Her favorite food is watercress. She slobbers when she eats. That's on account that her teeth are all chopped and broken, and really she's got more fat than meat. She's frothy at the mouth. Her breath gets mighty bad. She's noisy when she's drinking, and she'll beller if she's mad. Well, the crowd was deathly quiet. Not one amen could be heard. The congregation hoped that Jed had spoke his final word. A deacon came and whispered in Jed's ear when the congregation froze, but for all the good that done, he might just as well have whispered in his nose. Jed appeared to understand, and he turned and he faced the crowd, but because he could not hear himself, his voice came out harsh and loud. She likes to run in sagebrush. When she's wet, she's smelly. Her left ear is split. She's lost one tit, and the hair's all rubbed off her belly. A bunch of us were camped away out in the brush. When up rode this fella, who sure seemed in a rush. Well, he fell down off his horse, right close beside our fire. What's the matter with you? Some of us inquired. The only answer we got was this gut-wrenching moan. His lips were all spattered and covered with foam. Limbs started to twitch, and his face was all red, and his eyes was rolled up on the back of his head. Well, his clothes were all dirty and covered with dirt, and he'd slobbered all down the front of his shirt. He gasped and he gagged as he fought for each breath. Now, most of us were sure he was real close to death. Up sits this old cowboy, wisdom to spare. Looks, says, just stand back, give that old boy some air. Then he reaches into his pocket and pulls out his snuff. Giving her a snap, says, you know, I think there is just enough to relieve this poor soul, at least for a bit. See, he's just in the throes of a nicotine fit.
sitting around just spending my time. You see, I was out of a job, and not holding it down. When this fella steps up and says, well, I suppose that you're a bronc rider, by the looks of your clothes. Well, your guess would be right, and a darn good one, I claim. So I asked if he had any bad ones to tame. Yep, he said, I got one that surely can buck. Why, at throwing good riders, he's had lots of luck. He said his old pony ain't never been rode, that the boys that get on him is just bound to get thrown. Well, I gets excited, and I asked what he'd pay if I did ride that old critter for a couple of days. Well, he said, I'll give you $10. On your man. I never seen the horse that I couldn't fathom. The horse don't live. In fact, it probably ain't never drawn breath, and I couldn't ride till it plumb starved to death. Now, I don't want to brag, but I do got this to say. I ain't been piled for a many a day. Well, he says, grab your saddle. I'll give you a chance. So we load into his buckboard and drift off for the ranch. Well, I stays until morning. And then right after Chuck, I steps out to see if that old outlaw really could buck. And there in a hoss corral standing alone was this little old caballo. He was a strawberry roan. Well, his legs was all spattered, and he walked pigeon-toed with little pig eyes and a big Roman nose, 2 little ears that touch at the tip with a big double square tattooed on his hip. Yes, he'd been eunuched and was old, with a long lower jaw. You could tell with one eye he was a regular outlaw. Well, I put on my spurs. I was sure feeling fine. I tugged on my hat and I gathered my twine. Well, I throws my loop on him, and boys, I knew then, by the time he'd get bit, I sure will have earned that 10. I puts my blinds on him. Oh, man, what a fight. Well, next came the saddle. Well, I screwed that on tight. Then I piles aboard him and lifted the blind. My plan was to stay in the middle to see him unwind. Well, he lowers his neck, and he must have unwound, because he seemed to quit living down on the ground. He'd jump up, heading east. He'd land, heading west. So stay in the middle, I was doing my best. Then he goes a frog walking, and he heaves a big sigh. Why, actually, he only lacks wings for to be able to fly. He turns his old belly right up to the sun, and I'll tell you, he sure was a sun-loving son of a gun. No doubt he was the worst bucker I have ever seen on this range. I'll bet you he could turn on a nickel and still give you some change. And while he's a bucking, he squeals like a shoat. I'll tell you, that bronc has sure got my goat. I'd say no fooling. That bronc could sure buck. Well, I'm still in the saddle, and I'm building up reps. Then he hits on all four, with sun up his sides. I really can't tell you what's stopping him from shedding his hide. Then I loses my stirrups, and also my hat, and I'm grabbing for leather. I'm just as blind as a bat. And then, with a phenomenal leap, he goes up on high, leaving me sitting on nothing, way up in the sky. Well, I turns myself over and comes on back down to earth, and I lit there cussing the day of his birth. Now, folks, I knows there is ponies that I just ain't able to ride. There is some of them living. Nope, they haven't all died. I'll bet most of my money that there ain't no man alive that could stay on that old bronc when he makes that high dive. A cowboy and his trusty pal were camped one night by an old corral. They were looking after the boss's steers and looking for critters with lengthy ears. The summer work was long since through, and there was only the winter branding left to do. But when he went to rest, there was frost on his bed, so he pulled the tarp up over his head, and into his blankets he burrowed deep. Now he soon got warm and went fast asleep. He dreamed he was through with his wandering past, and now he'd entered into heaven safely at last. Well, a city was there with its pearly gates, its golden streets were wide and straight, and marble palaces gleamed and shone, and a choir sang around the great white throne. Outside there were trees and meadows green, such beautiful range he had never seen. Great rivers of purest waters flowed. It would never rained, never snowed. So the cowboy stood aside in the golden street. There were heavy spurs on his booted feet. His bat-winged chaps were just laced with wang, but he listened and he looked while the angels sang, and then he noticed that he was the only one with a broad-brimmed hat and a big six-gun. So he said to us, I'd sure admire to be dressed like one of that angel choir, instead of these spurs and chaps and gun. Do you reckon that's how it could be done? So they took him into a room aside, and they fastened wings to his toughened old hide. They fitted him out with a flowing robe like the lady who peers into the crystal globe. Well, they gave him a crown and a golden harp, and by now that frost lay thick on the cowboy's heart. Well, he twanged his harp, and he sang a while, and then he thought of something that made him smile. He said, I'll bet you these wings will do to show some Mustangs a thing or two. He says, I think I'll go and jump a bunch. I'll yell and hoop, and I'll kick their tails, and I'll flop and swoop. I'll light a straddle of one of the things, and I'll flop his flanks with my angel wings. I know, I'll grab him, I'll ride him bareback, and if I fail and he bucks me off, well, I'll just simply sail. So he went hunting wild horses in his dream. But all that he found was the chariot team that old Elijah had drove in there, and to pick on them had been hardly fair. So the cowboy seated himself beneath the tree, and he rested his crown upon his knee, and watched the beautiful angels go flying and fluttering to and fro. Well, at last one landed and began to walk. She came up close and began to talk. She had beautiful hair of golden brown, was dressed in a flimsy silken gown. She had dimpled cheeks, and her eyes were blue, and her face, fair white skin was beautiful too. So the old cowboy gazed at the angel's charms, and he attempted to clasp her within his arms. Stop, stop, she cried, or I'll make complaints to the great white throne of the ruling saints. Whoa, well, the cowboy hollered, I must confess. And he failed to bestow that fond caress. He said, you know, Miss Angel, it's sure too bad. This kind of country makes me sad. Why, there ain't no night. It's always day. And the beautiful ladies won't even play. There's all these beautiful homes and golden streets, and yet nobody sleeps. Nobody eats. There, look at all, I really feel sad because all this pure water. It's sad to think there ain't no cows nor horses to drink. Look at all this grass just going to seed. There just ain't no critters to eat to feed. Why, a person can't gamble. There is so much gold. Why, you can pick up more than what your arms can hold. And what's the use of the judge in the great white throne if troubles and fights ain't never known? I'll tell you, miss, and I'll tell you true. This is sure no spot for an old buckaroo. Well, the lady asked him about his former life. She learned he never had possessed a wife. But this angel lady, so sweet and nice, informed him that she had been married twice. She said that both of her guys had been quiet men. But she'd probably, if she ever did it again, she'd probably have to choose between the two. Either a sailor boy or a buckaroo. So, anyway, the lady then sat upon his knees and gave his neck such a hearty squeeze. But just then he heard an excited call. It was the gray old saint in the city wall. Well, he flopped his robe and he waved his arm until the crowd had gathered in great alarm. Then the cowboy found himself standing alone before the judge and the great white throne. What's this? The judge of the creation cried. How came this old sinner to get inside? Why, age must be dim in St. Peter's eye to let a spirit like that get by. Just look at his face. It's desert brown. Those bandy legs neath that angel gown. Why, he is a buckaroo. I know them well. Why, we barely allow them into hell. He ain't been here half a day, and already he's got an angel going astray. We can't permit him to stay at all. Just pitch him over the outside wall. So, saints and angels gave him a start, and he went falling towards earth like a falling dart. But he never remembered just where he lit, because he wakened before the tumble quit. The winter wind blew cold and sharp, and frost lay thick on the cowboy's start. His beautiful vision had turned to grief. So he fried his biscuit and ate his beef. He drank his coffee black and strong, and all that day as he rode along, he thought of that saint that butted in, and he said to himself with a wicked grin, he said, you know, I wish I had a hold of that old saint chap. I'd grab his whiskers and I'd sure change his map. I'd jump on his frame and stomp around till I stomped him right out of that saintly gown. And all the rest of his days, as he roamed and toiled, he often thought of that beautiful dream, so sadly spoiled by that meddlesome saint that caused it all when he gave the alarm from the jasper wall. Now, he never really did repent, and he certainly never prayed, but he always wished that they would have let him stay.
One day, a rancher got thrown from his horse. Took a hell of a thump to the head. The doctor told the family, well, a brain transplant in a week to 10 days, he'd be dead. Well, they said, we're a family of very modest means, but our savings account will drain. We have not ever bought anything like that before. What's the going price on a second-hand brain? Well, the doctor says, well, for $10,000, I can get you this lawyer's brain. It comes from a fellow named Brown. That's actually a really good price on that attorney's brain. They say he was one of the slickest old boys around. Now, for $20,000, I can get you a doctor's brain, a research specialist from UCLA. Why, if your daddy had a brain like that, why, he'd just sat around and ponder all day. Now, there is one more kind of brain that I know your daddy would like, but you might think a price is a bit high. You see, it's a bull rider's brain, and it costs $50,000. But they say he was a hell of a nice guy. Well, they knew immediately just which brain their daddy would like, but they just didn't have that much bread. So they talked it over and said they're going to take the doctor's brain instead. But why would a bull rider's brain cost that much? That issue still had them confused. Well, the doctor said that's fairly simple. That brain just like knew it never been used. Okay, let me tell you a story about a fella I used to know. He thought the sun got up and shone just to hear him crow. Yes, he figured there was no one else that knew just what made this old world tick. He always wore fancy clothes and jewelry. Well, we call him Flashy Dick. Now, Flashy Dick was a bull rider. And why, to hear him tell he could ride anything on which he hung his rope and bell. Yes, if you listen very much to Dick, why, just as sure as you were born, you'd hear he weren't scared of nothing, especially if it had hair or horns. Well, one day, it finally happened. Yes, Flashy Dick drew Leroy Brown. Now, Leroy had the reputation of being the baddest bull around. Leroy was quite a bull. He really loved to buck. And just as soon as he'd throw you off, well, then he'd turn right around and beat you up. Well, he sure don't scare me none, says old Dick, as he's getting ready for the fray. He says, I'll punch his hide so full of holes he won't even hold hay. Well, when Leroy left to shoot him, he had a real tight turn to the right. Of course, Flashy Dick was sitting straight and holding on mighty tight. So then Leroy dropped his shoulder, made a hard left turn with a mighty kick, and whoo! That's where he parted company with our hero, Flashy Dick. Old Dick just went a-flying through the air, just like a bird with a busted limb. And when he came back down to earth, while Leroy was sitting there waiting for him, he blows his nose and he charges. Oh, man, that bull was quick. But just the same, he scarcely touched the seat of the pants on Dick. But the little boost he got sure did put some speed in old Dick Boots. He built up such a head of speed he went running right through the chutes. His eyes was bugged plumb out. His face was a deathly white. And you could tell with just one little look he'd taken on a terrible fright. Well, the last time we seen Dick, he's heading out across the parking lot. Legs up pumping, arms were swinging. He was just giving her all he's got. Well, we hadn't seen Dick for quite a while. We thought maybe we should go out looking for him. And in comes this fella, and he's wearing a funny kind of a smile. He said, you needn't worry. I just seen old Flashy Dick. He's down there in the outhouse. He was scraping his shorts off with a stick. Okay, here's a story that's called Kamikaze Cow. It has to do with a little operation out on a ranch that they call it the switch, and it happens when you got one cow a little short of milk, or a calf is, you got to separate a set of twins or something of this nature, and it's called the switch, and that's what this story's about. It was back in the spring of '83. There was Ed and Warner and me. See, it was cabin time out of the old Esquire B ranch. Now, Ed, the boss, he was an ornery old cuss with a bark, just as bad as his bite. Sure didn't seem to help his disposition then, with the heifers all calving at night. Now, me and Warner's doing the riding, and, well, things is going okay. That is until we ran in that old bag up there on that ridge that day. You see, this old girl was calving, but just not having no luck. Her calf's all tangled and dead and stuck. Well, it would have been just a normal workaday cowboy thing, except for the old cow that was. That old girl was a witch on wheels. Not kamikaze, Warner said with an oath. Well, she just turned around and gave a hook at us both. You see, kamikaze was what we named her, old hype. She just loved beating on cowboys. She didn't even seem to care if she died. Well, I shook out a loop. Well, let's get her done. Why, making her hurt might even be fun. But Warner, being older and wiser than I, got a little twinkle there in one eye. He said, you know, that old girl's disposition is just a whole bunch like Ed's. Maybe we ought to trail her on into the shed. We can jerk out that calf, kick her into the dries, and she'll go to the auction. We'll have finally kissed her goodbye. So off the ridge we came. We're carrying the mail. Kamikaze's in the lead with a 9 in her tail. Well, she gets to the barn, clears the top pole, smashes 3 gates, says she's definitely on a roll. But then she comes around this one corner and just irons out old Ed. But then she made a silly mistake. The old girl ran right in the shed. Well, I got there first and slam shut the door. We got her now. Yep, she's captured for sure. Well, Ed had swallowed his snooze, and then she'd stepped in his hat. It sure didn't help his outlook, I'll tell you that. It's a dang wonder that I ain't dead. what's that blankety-blank thing doing in my shed? I thought you was cowboys, so why the chains? I thought you're supposed to keep care of all that stuff out in the range. It's hard to reason with a fellow like that. But Warner explained that, well, the calf was dead, and we figured this was going to be our one chance to get that old girl plumb off of the ranch. What? The calf is dead? Ed slowly spoke. I knowed you was thinking you can always smell smoke. Well, it would sure be an awful shame to see all that milk go to waste. Maybe I should go get the orphan and give him a taste. You see, he had this bum calf with which he'd been fussing with the Jim Beam bottle and just a whole bunch of cussing. That little feller had the old boy in a fuzz, his maternal traits being low like he was. Well, I just throwed my head back and I laughed. You ain't never going to get her to take that calf. That head of hers ain't got nothing in it. She'll stomp him. It won't take a minute. You don't think I can? The old-timer asks. I got this trick that I learned from John Bass. You boys get the calf pulled out of that witch. I'll get the orphan, and we'll make the switch. I told you we should have roped her up in the trees. If we're living by sundown, it'll be surprising to me. But Warner got his rope, and I got the chains. We slipped on into the barn, stayed out of range. Well, now, the sight of that critter would have made the devil go pale. She's backed into a corner there, wringing her tail and a bawling and a pawing and a throwing up dirt. Why, just the thought of that scene makes my old body hurt. She's got two beady eyes, both of them red. Looks like they're coming out of one hole, right in the middle of her head. Well, she's got a big Roman nose with an underslung snout with a mouth that's turned down and a permanent pout. One horn's been bust off, it hung down by her ear, but the other stood straight up, just like a yearling reindeer. Well, we're backed into a corner there, plotting her fate. Warner says, yeah, I can catch her all right, but I'm going to need you for bait. Oh, well, I'm not too swift at thinking I'm slow. But there's a hole in this plan I want you to know, because what if your loop don't find her head? What do you think my mama's going to say when she finds out I'm dead? Well, I tell you, I'm tougher than nails, but I'm sorry to say there ain't no brains on my resume. So I enters that pen, just like Gene Autry I strode. My chest was puffed out like a stomped-on toad. My bard is sitting up there on the gate, his loop by his side, just lying in wait. He's got his toes wrapped around the top rail tight. Don't worry, boy, I'll get her all right. Well, I was halfway to her when she made her run. Dang, but she sure was a quick old son of a gun. 0 to 60 in 3 seconds flat. No time for visiting, I'll tell you that. So I turned on my heel and I run for the trap. The hula-hand flies and I heard her head snap. Warner started ground dallies around this old post. I'll tell you, my knees was shaking. I was just as white as a ghost. Whew. Well, my pard in the front to pull the slack. I takes the change and I goes to the back. Well, now, trying to catch a crazy kangaroo on a trampoline would have been easier caught than her. But somehow I managed, amidst the fury of the flying feet and the fur. Now, the feet was hers and the fur was all mine, not really a real good kind of trade. Why, I must have lost at least a pound of hide with every jump that she made, but that old girl just would not give no slack. She'd buck around in an arc and go till she hit the fence, and I'd lose a little more bark. But you see, I had this death grip on her tail, and I was trying to ignore the pain. But we'd just come around, hit this one side of the fence, we'll come right around and do it all over again. Well, I tell you, after 8 or 10 laps of that, it's beginning to get me down. I thought maybe I should go back to college, take an inside job in town. But then she stopped right dead in her tracks and sat up fast and hard and cast her two beady eyes right on my faithful pard. Well, his face was just as red as a spank baby bottom. I hadn't noticed there as we fought, but he just had a hook left there on that dally post. He was actually just hanging on hard to the knot. Well, I took advantage of the lull before she changed direction to perform a kamikaze obstetrical inspection. Yes, our diagnosis proved correct. Yep, her baby was a goner. I got the legs untangled, got the chains put on her. The calf was coming fine. She's backed up, tight against the rope, just like I knew she would, but she really wasn't helping much. Then, dang the cowboy luck. Yeah, you guessed it, the dad-burned hips got stuck. Well, I put a boot up about her against her tail. It's a method that's been proven, but she almost filled my pant leg when her bowels started moving. The extra leverage really helped. The calf was coming now for sure. And then old Ed stuck his ugly puss inside the old barn door. Well, he's got this orphan calf curled in his left arm tight. And his cold cur dog Shorty he's dragging up on the right. Now, Shorty's disposition is just exactly like his boss. I think he's a blue heeler badger kind of cross. Really now, folks, everything that happened next is really just a blur. Because kamikaze led into Shorty, Shorty tied into her, but this time she didn't stop. Nope, the Hondu just wouldn't hold her, and she darn near ripped the arms right out of Warner's shoulder. Well, I landed flat on my back amidst the slime and the gore with the dead calf laying on my chest. Ed slipped back out the door. Well, my partner quickly jumped down off the gate and opened up a pen. He reckoned he could save my life if he could drag me in. But by now they were on their second lap, and he just didn't have much time, and he ended up getting the calf sign leg instead of getting mine. Well, my air was gone. I couldn't move. Now Shorty'd had enough. He ran right between Warner's legs. Kamikaze was just too tough. Of course, that meant that Warner had to slam the old gate just to save his own skin. Well, that left me and that kamikaze cow alone there in that pen. Well, now, she's a-starting out in her victory lap. And I'm a-staring at that horn. I'm starting to think about shish kebabs, angels, the day that I was born. Then, like a steaming locomotive with her head between her knees from the other end, and she's heading straight for me. Well, I turned over on my belly, got up on all fours, but I was absolutely, completely tuckered right out. I mean, I just couldn't do no more. Well, now I'll swear that I heard the proverbial fat lady lift her voice in song. The final curtain falling. But by jiggers, I was wrong. That old girl got right up to me, started sniffing on the ground, and then she started licking my hind pocket like I was the cutest thing she'd ever found. Yes, that old basket trick had worked all right. That any fool could see. But in the absence of an orphan calf, the critter's claiming me. Well, now I know it's in my own best interest to go along with this silly plan. I'll just wait. I'll make my break. I mean, I'll get out when I can. But then she shoved me back to the dinner pail. Now that was a sight to behold. Don't think I'll ever forget that, even when I'm gray and old. Well, it was a scabby old bag, burdocks in the hair. At least 2 years' worth of old cowmen who were hanging on it there. Well, now, folks, I want you to put yourself in my position. Now, tell me, what would you do if that kamikaze mama had laid the claim on you? Well, me, I was way too tired to run. I absolutely too scared to curse. So I just closed my eyes and started in to nurse. Okay, this little story on Slim, Little Slim. Late again? The third grade teacher said to Little Slim. You see, whenever anyone was late for school, it usually was him. But this weren't my fault, Miss Annie. You can blame this on my pa. The reason I'm 3 hours late is because pa sleeps nights in the raw. Now, Miss Addie had been teaching grammar for school for 30-some-odd years, but she asked little Sim just what he meant by that, despite her mounting fears. Well, full of grin and mischief, in the flower of his youth, see, Slim and Trouble were old partners, but he always told the truth. You see, Miss Addie, out at the ranch the last 2 nights, this old coyote done ate 6 hens and killed Ma's best milk goat. So then last night, Pa heard a noise out in the chicken pen. He grabbed his gun and said to Ma, you know, that darn coyote's back again. Stay back, he yelled to all us kids. I wouldn't want you hurt. Well, there he was, just as naked as a jaybird. No boots, no pants, and no shirt. And so to the hen house, on all fours he crawls like an Injun on the snoot, and he sticks his old double-barrel shotgun through the window of the coop. Now, as he peels into the darkness, with coyotes on his mind, our old hound dog Zeke had done woke up, and now he came sneaking up behind. Then we all looked on plumb helpless, as Pa was cold-nosed without warning. Miss Addie, we've been cleaning chickens since 3 o'clock this morning. This poem is called Reincarnation. What is reincarnation? A cowboy once asked his old friend. Well, his pal replies, well, it happens when your life has reached its end. They comb your hair, they wash your neck, they clean up your fingernails, and then they lay you away in this padded box, away from life's travails. Well, now the box in you then goes into a hole that's been dug into the ground. Now, reincarnation sets in once you've been planted beneath that mound. You see, them clods break down, as does the box, and you who are inside. And now you're just beginning on your final transformation ride. Well, in a while, some grass will grow upon that rendered mound, and one day in your moldered grave, a lonely flower is found. Now, let's just suppose that a horse should wander by and should graze upon that flower that once was you, but now it has become your vegetative bower. Now that posy that horse done ate up, along with the rest of his feed, gets to making bones and fat and muscle that is required by that steed. But some is left. The horse cannot use. So it passes on through. And it finally drops upon the ground. That's something that was you. Now, let's just suppose that I should wander by. And I sees upon the ground. And I wonders and I ponders about that, that object that I have found. Then I gets to thinking about that reincarnation, life and death and such. I comes away concluding, Slim, really, you hadn't even changed all that much. A rancher died and left behind his wife of 40 years. Yeah, she missed him so, but don't you know, she had dried up all her tears when she heard of this Indian lady who could talk to the other side. Well, she never had believed in that kind of stuff, but now she figured she'd give it a try. She went to see the lady, praying that it weren't no prank, and asked her if she could put her in trust with her dear departed Frank. Well, the lady started chatting, and soon a voice rang clear. Who in the hell's disturbing my work? Why, it's me, Frank. It's Marion. I'm here. How you doing, Marion? Not too bad for a grieving wife. Just want to find out how you're making out there in the afterlife. Oh, really? I couldn't get any better. Why, there's blue sky just as far as I can see, and fluffy white clouds floating over my head, and grass clear up past my knees, and cows. Yep, hundreds of beautiful cows. Why, they're just a-grazing all over the place. Why, I ain't done nothing since I got here, except walk around with a smile on my face. Well, it's great to hear you're happy, and it's nice to have been able to talk to you. And heaven, it's really nice to know that heaven has a ranch, so you'll always have something to do. Oh, I got plenty to keep me busy. Why, each day I have to meet a quota. But Marion, dear, I'm not up in heaven. I'm now a bull down here in South Dakota.
Roping bears, said my old Uncle Sid, is sure a heap of fun. And a whole bunch more gizzard throwing than to shoot 'em with some old gun. So I roped me a big old he one time when I was young and raw. Why, he must have weighed 500 pounds. Monstrous was his paw. He'd wandered out upon the flat. He was looking for cow chips, grubs and such. You know them grubs and worms, they suit a bear just like pretzels suit the Dutch. Well, you gotta have a pretty fast pony, because a bear can surely split the breeze. And your pony's gonna have to wiggle if he's gonna beat him to the trees. But that old roan that I was riding, he was tough and mighty fleet. And he overhauled old Bruin. My loop was quick and neat. It kept him snug around the neck, and when he hit the end, I heard those cinches stretching, and I felt the saddle bend. Well, at first I was scared the rope would bust. I'd lose him if it should. But about a moment later, folks, I wished to hell it would. That old bear reared up and popped his teeth. It was just like a pistol crack. Then he grabbed the rope, and hand over hand, came right up the slack. Well, I gave a squall and swung my hat to slap him in the eyes, but he burying a critter that's very easy to surprise. Then my pony tried to quit me, and he had a bear in tow, and clinging to the saddle was a load he couldn't throw. He got a straddle of a load, rope, a log, a bush, a bear. He wallowed it on his haunches, and he pawed the upper air. That old deer's jaws and paws and claws, why, they pretty near had me stunned. But the rope was anchored to the horn, and it just would not come undone. Seemed like we'd fought for hours, and I just couldn't see no hope. Finally, the old bear bit my line into it and put us on a lope. Now, roping bears, said my old Uncle Sid, sure heap fun. At least I've heard folks say it is. Now me, I only ever caught but just that one. Now I know it didn't take no special trick at all to snag him in your noose. The catch was mighty simple, but I'll tell you, it was hell to turn him loose. I was riding home on Christmas Eve. It was many years ago. It was cold, getting dark, starting into snow. Snow was sticking in my horse's hair. It looked like he'd rolled in sugar coating. When out on the trail ahead, I saw this shadow floating. Then a voice called out to me, "Hello!" Well, you can imagine my surprise when a fellow with a team and sleigh appeared before my eyes. "Reckon I got lost," he said. "I wonder if you'd help me out. I got into this here snowstorm now, and somehow I've gotten turned about. I've got a very important job tonight, and at that I cannot fail." "Well, I'd sure be much obliged, cowboy, if you'd kindly point out the trail." Well, I stepped down off my horse and broke off a willow twig, and commenced to draw on a map in the snow on the dashboard of his rig. Well, he smiled, said, "Thank you, friend," and he shoved his lines out of his team. Okay, and away they went, and I disappeared in the storm, just like a vision of a dream. Well, I couldn't believe what I had just seen as I stepped back on my horse and started heading again for home. But I know that sometimes your mind will wander if you spend too much time alone. But then I happened to glance down in the last dim light of day, and there in the new fallen snow were the tracks left by a sleigh. After that, it didn't seem near so dark nor cold, the storm not near so bad. And folks, I absolutely can't explain the good feelings that I had. Now you can say what you like, think what you like about who it was that I saw out there that Christmas Eve, but Santa Claus is still out there for those of us who believe.
One day a preacher saw a cowboy come walking up his lane. He had a saddle over his shoulder. His face was marked with pain. "Well, come right on in. Pull you up a chair. Now tell me of the problem that has brought you such despair." "Well," the cowboy said, well, my horse stepped in a hole and took a fall. I broke his leg. Well, I had to shoot him. After all, you just can't let him suffer, but it fills me with remorse to take his life that way. But preacher, now, well, I need a horse." Well, the preacher said, "You're lucky, because I got just what you need. Yep, I trained the horse for my own use, but I'll sell you that there steed. He's as sound as any dollar. He's up to any task. You'll find him plenty willing. He'll give you all you ask. Why don't you come on out and see him, and see if you'll agree? He'll do for you just what you have in mind. He's good, I guarantee." Well, the chance to get a horse like that sure boosted on his morale. So he got up with the preacher, and they both went out to the corral. Well, now that preacher, he sure did know his horses. That was very plain to see. So they both struck a bargain for a reasonable fee. "Well, you have bought the best, and that I will verify, but there is one more thing I better tell you before you say goodbye. You see, I trained that horse to use myself, and of course I taught him by the book. Now for you to use him, here are the rules that you must not overlook. He works by voice command alone. Your guard you must not drop, because get up don't make him go. Whoa, don't make him stop. No, you see, I trained that horse with words that I use in sermons that I preach. So you just simply have to learn those words and apply the proper use to each. Now to make him go, you just say, 'Praise the Lord,' and he'll step right out. Now, you want to see him stop? Just simply say, 'Amen.' A little bit of practice, you can learn that in no time. Those words will make him hit a run, or it'll stop him on a dime." Well, the old cowboy smiled, saddled up, then making this small clicking sound. "Okay, now, praise the Lord." Well, the horse stepped out, and the canter headed down the lane. The cowboy says, "Amen." Horse came to stop again. This was going to be easier than he had even dared to hope. So with that knowledge shouting, "Praise the Lord," they hit a lope. Well, in fluid motion, horse and rider seemed to be as one. The miles just simply fell away. Man, but that horse could really run. The cowboy didn't really seem to know just how far he'd really gone. Still amazed, he saw this big cliff that he'd come upon. Then he remembered, yes, of course, it was the river, with a cliff on either side. And he knew that if he went over, it would be his last ride. "Whoa, horse!" he shouted, and he pulled back with all his might. But of course that horse didn't slow his steps, nor did it slow his headlong flight. Whoa, now just what was it that the preacher said he was supposed to say to make that horse come to a stop? Now did he say to pray? No, that's not quite it. Oh, now I know. Amen, he fairly speak. Well, the horse came to a sliding stop, but he could barely speak. His heart was right up in his throat, just a beating like a drum. He could scarcely catch his breath. Why, the scare had left him numb. Why, the cliff edge was right there, right back underneath the horse's chin. Whew, how lucky it was that he'd remembered that he'd had to say amen. Well, he stood up in the stirrups, looked away down at the buff. You know, there wasn't room for one more step. I'll tell you that was close enough. He had almost met his maker and collected on any reward. Well, he sank back down on the saddle and he said, "Man, oh man, well, praise the Lord." Ah! All right, This poem is entitled Little Blue Roan. Now, most all of you boys who rode horses like that, never very thin, but sure never got fat. The type that has the mustache on his lip. He was high at the withers, low at the hip, ears always up, wicked bright eyes, and don't you forget, he was plenty cow-wise. Well, his ears and his fets and his pasterns was black, and a line of the same ran the length of his back. Cold mornings he'd buck, he always would kick. No horse for a kid or a man that was sick, but Lord, what a bundle of muscle and bone. He was a horse for a cowboy, that Little Blue Roan. Well, for afternoon work or for riding a herd, why, he could turn anything but a lizard or bird. And riding outside, how that brute could move out, why, he'd be to him before they knew what it was about. And running downhill didn't faze him at all. He was just like a buck goat. He just never did fall. Well, one day in the foothills, he did give me a break. He saved me from making just a terrible mistake. Well, I was riding alone at a slow, easy pace, taking stock of the critters that used that place, when I spies this old heifer without any brand. Now, how my boys ever missed her, I just don't understand, for none of the animals in that country was wild. This was going to be just like taking candy away from a child. Well, she never knew just what I had on my mind when I bedded her down at the end of my twine. Well, I dropped up her toes on an old hogging string and lit me a fire for her to heat up my ring. I figured, you see, I was there all alone. That is until I happened to notice that Little Blue Roan. Well, the horse he was using, his eyes and his ears, and I figured right now there's somebody else new. He seemed to be watching a grove of pinot trees, and I sure took a hint from that Little Blue Roan. Well, instead of my brand, I run on another. Actually, the brand I put on was the same as the calf's mother. I had branded her right, pulled her up by the tail, gave her a kick in her rump for to make the brute sail. I had branded her proper and notched both her ears, when out of those pinot, 2 cowmen appears. Well, they both turned the critter to get a good look, while I turned and wrote the brand down on my old tally book. There was nothing to do, so they rode up and spoke, and we all three sat down for a sociable smoke. Now, the one actually owned the critter that I happened to brand. He thanked me, of course, and we grinned and shook hands, which he might not have done if he only had known the warning that I got from that Little Blue Roan.
Now, this next one is about a cowboy buying a bra. See, cowboys are all really helpful people. I mean, they just help themselves almost to no end. And sometimes they get into trouble because they're trying to be too helpful, you see. That's what this story is about. I'm not much for shopping or for going into town, except for cattle shipping time. I'm really not very easily found. But the time came when I just had to go, and so I left the kids with Ma. But before I left, she asked me, well, would you pick me up a bra? Well, without thinking, I said, sure. I mean, how tough could that job be? So I bent over and kissed her, and I said, okay, well, I should be back by 3. Well, I got the things done that I needed, and I started to regret ever offering to buy that thing. I mean, I worked me up a sweat. Well, I went down to this one lady store. I didn't, my hat was pulled down over my eyes. I certainly didn't want to take the chance on being recognized. Well, I walked into this here store and walked right up to the sales girl, and I didn't hem or haw. I just walked right up and said, look, I'm here to buy a bra. Well, from behind, I heard a snicker. And I turned around to see, and there was every woman in that store was a gawking right at me. Well, what type would you be looking for? Phew, that had to be shaking my head. I mean, I only ever seen one bra before. Thought bras was bras, I said. She gave me a disgusted look and said, well, mister, that's where you're wrong. Follow me, I heard her say. So, like a dog, I trailed along. Well, she took me down this one alleyway where bras was on display. I thought my jaw would hit the floor when I saw all that lingerie. They had all these different types and styles I'd never even seen before. I thought I'd go plumb crazy before I left that lady's store. They had bras they wear for 18 hours. They had bras that cross your heart. They had bras that lift and separate, and that's just a start. They had bras that make you feel like you weren't wearing one at all. They had bras that you can train in. You know, when you start off, when you're small. Well, I finally made my mind up and picked up a black and lacy one. Bag it up, I told the gal. I figured I was done. But then she asked me for the size. Well, I didn't hesitate. I mean, I knew that measurement by heart. It was 6 7/8. 6 7/8, you say? That really can't be right. Yes, ma'am, it certainly is. I just measured them last night. I thought that girl was going into shock. Must have took her by surprise when I told her that my wife's bust was the same as my hat size. Well, that's what I used to measure with. I figured it was fair, but if I'm not, well, I'm sorry, ma'am, but well, this threw another step. Well, by now a crowd had gathered, and they was all a-busting up, especially after the sales girl asked to use my hat to measure for the cup. Well, she finally got it figured, so I gave the gal her pay. Turned to leave the stores, tipped my hat, and said good day. Well, my wife had heard this story long before I made it. I'll bet you a dozen women must have called her on the phone. She was still a-laughing, but by then I didn't care. Now she don't ask, and I don't shop for no women's underwear. Now, you're supposed to know as you get a little older, you're supposed to get a little smarter. You're definitely supposed to be smarter than kids. And if that's what you think, that you're a better horse trader than some of the kids are, let me just tell you this one, you just get to thinking about whether you're right or wrong. I traded for a horse one time that sure wouldn't have taken no beauty prize. He was a long-geared, blue roan gelding. Not too bad for weight or size. See, I had to make a bunch of tough trips. And this trader guaranteed me that that horse would show me lots of country and not need too much for rest or feed. Now, he sure ain't no kid's horse, no, but he sure will pack you up the creek. Now, he will hump up on some occasions. I mean, he's a buck. And he has been known to kick. Now, I wouldn't trade him to just anyone without feeling some remorse. But if you're a sure-enough cowpuncher, mister, then he's your kind of horse. Well, I stepped on that horse next morning. He commenced to buck and to bawl. I'll tell you, that trader maybe hadn't lied none, but boy, he sure hadn't told it all. Well, we really tore up the country where he threw that equine fit, and I almost ran out of handholds before he finally quit. But that ride just kind of seemed to set a pattern. Things just never seemed to change. Although I showed him lots of country, almost every corner of the range, but every day that I'd ride that bugger, he'd keep me sitting tight. I knew I'd make at least 3 bronc rides every day before he'd pack me home that night, which may not have been too bad for most ponies that I'd known. But that old critter had my number. I mean, I just blared to get him rode. But the thing that really spooked me and set a damper on my pride, that he was learning new ways to buck faster than I was learning how to ride. Well, we pulled into camp one evening. It was getting kind of late. There was this gray horse in the corral, in the saddle by the gate. Well, I looks that gray horse over. I sure liked what I seen. And this kid shows up around the barn. He's maybe about 16. He said he'd lamed that horse that morning, coming down off a granite grade. He wondered maybe if I might have a horse I wouldn't mind to trade. And he said he just didn't have the time to stop and rest and let him heal. Since beggars can't be choosers, why, he'd make most any kind of deal. Well, when a fella's trading horses, almost anything is fair. So I traded him my blue horse there for his gray, then and there. But then my conscience got to hurting when I thought of what I did, to trade that fly-blow dink off like that off on some little wet-nosed kid. So next morning after breakfast, I said, listen, lad, you know the trade you made last night was bad. You know, that old blue horse is a tough one. He's probably worse than anything you ever see. Why, he'll kick you, strike you, stampede, I'll tell you, he's a sorry SOB. Why, it's almost more than what I can do to ride him. And to tell it to you straight, I believe you'll be doggone lucky just to ride him to the gate. Now, there's 2 or 3 old mares there in the saddle bunch that ain't got too much going for them, but I kind of got a hunch they'll get you where you're going just as long as you just don't crowd them none. But damn, I sure would hate to see you try and ride that blue roan bugger, son. Well, he says, I told you there last night I'd make most any kind of trade. But I certainly do appreciate you saying what a bad mistake I made. But my old pappy said that when you're trading horses, irregardless of how you feel, even if you think you took a whooping, a deal is still a deal. Now, you say he's not bad for travel and he ain't too bad for speed. Well, you see, I'm kind of a tight one. But you see, that's exactly what I need. Now, I traded for him fair and square, and damn his blue roan hide, when I pull out of here this morning, that's the horse I'm going to ride. Well, I watched him cinching up the saddle. and he pulled his hat way down. Then he steps up into that rigging just like he was going straight to town. Well, he stuck his spurs up the horse's front shoulder and got that blue roan hair aflying. Then he tilted his head back and screamed just like a wounded mountain lion. Woo! Well, folks, you may have heard of the Bucking Horse Ballet. You may even have heard of Poetry in Motion. But guaranteed the day of the ride I saw that day just plumb defied description. Why, I still can see it plain. It was almost if it had been written in slow motion and was now branded on my brain. Well, I don't suppose I could give you all the details today, even if I tried. What I am prepared to do is stand before you and say that by the saints, that kid could ride. He sat there in the saddle, leaning back, plumb relaxed, just like he was laying home in bed. And every time that pony jumped, that kid was a half a jump ahead. Well, I knew before that ride was over, I could learn a few things still. I said, son, I'm awful sorry. I just completely misjudged your riding skill. Oh, shucks, he said that, mister. He said, that's okay. As he started and turned and going on his way. But he said, if you think this horse can buck, I don't think you'd even put a saddle on that gray.